with a good friend of mine, Jonathan Ray, one of the few, unfortunately, friends that I've kept in contact with from back in the day, really not that long ago. But
That's so sad, isn't it?
I know,
Yeah.
and we can get into that a little bit because you're one of the few people that I know from that time frame that I qualified to talk about it. But first question I always ask: 50 to 100 words. Tell us who Jonathan Ray is.
Yeah, so if you don't know me, it's okay because I'm not that famous. Even though I'm on, Micah's famous broadcast here,
I know.
he made an exception. So my name is Jonathan Ray. My dad is Mike Ray. I get to serve on staff with him here at Hopewell Baptist Church in Napa, California. So Napa is right between Sacramento and San Francisco in the Napa Valley. Married to Melanie, and we have a 20-month-old who is getting into all sorts of trouble all the time. No, but he's great, Jay Michael. And so I get to serve on staff here at the church that I was raised in and just having a good time. I'm an assistant pastor. I do a little programming work on the side too. And that's pretty much it.
That's it. Now, you have a lot of other interests that you dabble in, as do I, obviously, this being one of them. But you had, I don't mean to jump straight into it too quickly. You have a passion for it, and you enjoy teaching, you enjoy learning, a lot of those different types of things. What are some outlets right now that you get to exercise that spiritual gift in right now? Because I think you have it's a new class you started, right? Pretty recently?
No, not yet.
Okay.
That might be down the road. We'll see.
Okay.
But right after college, graduated from Golden State like you, and just felt like I needed to dive in a little bit more to the Bible, and felt like I opened up the Bible and there's whole books of the Bible I not only didn't understand, I didn't know how to find the answers to what I was reading. Whole swaths of Ezekiel you just look at and you're like, man, I'm glad someone understands this, and especially like the book of Zechariah, right? And so I felt kind of discouraged that if I ever do an adult Sunday school or something like that, I'll have to dodge certain books of the Bible, and that means that there's whole sections of theology that I wouldn't be too strong on. I'd be very good at telling you what I believe. It's just probably not very good at explaining the whole counsel of God. So I wanted to. I did an online program, Master of Divinity, and did the original languages track. So learned to read Greek and Hebrew, and then that has not just helped sermon preparation and stuff like that, but it's helped me personally in devotions. I use that every single day of my life. And it's helped me, and it's helped my wife, helped our marriage, just digging deeper into the Word of God. And it helps you understand it with precision and accuracy. And when you do, then you get to savor it a little bit more. And it's helped me a whole lot. And it's not like I'm an expert in any way. I don't preach every single Sunday. We'll be starting an adult Sunday school class coming up soon here, and so I'll get the chance to do that again. I did that back in Baltimore when I was on staff. But just now starting it up now that the health is a little bit better. And so, being able to do it week in and week out will be nice. And getting to put that into, to practice every single week instead of say 5 or 6 times a year when I get to, preach here at Hopewell.
Sure. It comes to mind a study I read a long time ago that food that you cook yourself is just a little bit more enjoyable for some reason. Your brain because you saw the entire preparation process, maybe the anticipation. But I think it probably holds true a little bit for Bible study too. It's great to hear a man of God or someone preach and expound a great truth. But there's something to being able to mine out some of these things, and we're not talking new things. There's nothing new in the sun, but being able to dive in a little bit. And you've been an evangelist in that way to me, just pointing out some tools and encouraging me to do that. Because a lot of times you can get stuck on, here's what I do, here's what I know, and yeah, you dabble with reading and you look at some other things, but that very diligent time, really soaking in God's word and purposefully trying to mine it out is something we don't make time for a lot. Just because we're here. I know the answer, but what's a tool or a couple tools that you use religiously to help with that study that some pastors, assistant pastors might be interested in looking into?
Yeah, and again, I don't claim to be, some expert or guru on this. I just know what's helped me. Um, I haven't read a print Bible in probably 7 years. So I do my devotions on my laptop, and I have a program called Logos, and so it's kind of the Lexus of Bible software programs, and it's expensive. I mean, I've probably spent as much on this program as I have my car, and that may seem really really odd, but it is my library, and so I don't have a library of, 5,000 print books. I have a library of about, I don't know, 4,500 digital books, and it's stuff I really do use. So that's helped me, and it's allowed me to um, use the resources and not just have them sit on shelves. Sometimes bookshelves, look really nice, and it um, makes you look very scholarly. But if you're not using some of these tools, it's not very helpful. They're just kind of sitting there. But a thing like Logos allows you to do research at a rapid pace. It allows you to get what you want very quickly, and it's really helped me in that area, whether it's been looking into Bible backgrounds or word studies, or a topic study, sermon preparation. From A to Z, it's been very very helpful. So I don't just use it for sermon prep, but I also, it's daily devotions, and so as I'm going through a text, I will have notes attached to the actual text in the program, and it's become kind of my running commentary on the Bible, but it's mixed in with my devotion notes. I used to, before I got into this program, I would hand scribble little journal entries, for devotions, and that was great. Except, I mean, I'm sure they're somewhere in a drawer, and they were great devotions that I had, but I don't get to profit off of those times with the Lord anymore. Those seed thoughts are just, in a drawer. But doing it digitally, you don't lose anything. And so my running commentary on the Bible now is like 800 pages in Word. It's just accumulated over time, and it's not all my own thoughts. It's sometimes you copy and paste, things from
Mm-hmm.
commentaries or word definitions or this or that. And so having that at my disposal, where I can look at a note from 6 years ago, is very very helpful.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to me because obviously I'm using this medium of social media and technology to put this podcast out and things. But there's a lot of tools that, and now is there a learning curve? Yeah. With anything worth doing, there's probably a learning curve. And does it cost money? Yeah. And anything worth doing is going to cost you time and money. That's how it goes. But a conversation we've had in the past was, how we feel like there's so many things we didn't learn in Bible college. And that's not a knock on either Bible college I went to or the Bible colleges that you went to. They weren't set up to be seminaries. They're very practically based. Now, I didn't learn every single practical thing. 5 years in the ministry, there's a lot of stuff I didn't learn in Bible college too. But I think to your point, we need to make it a lifelong discipline of Bible study instead of expecting that we're going to learn everything about Ezekiel and Zechariah in 4 years of Bible college learning. It's not going to happen. And I think it's a great tool. Now, going back, we kind of jumped right over it, but what is kind of your, not necessarily Bible college, but what is kind of your genesis of who Jonathan Ray is? Go back to, comic book number one, origin story. What's kind of your upbringing? Obviously, growing up in a preacher's home, but what does that kind of look like for people that aren't familiar with you?
Preachers' kids are usually punks, and that would that would qualify me a little bit in as a teenager. And so you had some up and down times. Midway through Bible college, there was a big turning point for me when um, when I really asked myself, am I going to do this for my whole life here, and not just do it because it's a something expected of me or whatever. And it was a big crisis of faith moment. That's not an exaggeration. And so I asked a lot of questions that maybe were taboo, like, hey, you should be farther along than this. And I started asking some fundamental questions, and that propelled me into some of that. And that's helpful. And
Sure.
so you remember, we got to do some guest preaching and filling in pulpits. And so when you feel like I have the answer, you know, um, whether it's some sort of question about separation standards, or it's a question about bigger pictures, like can I trust the Bible? Is Jesus who he said he was? Like bigger stuff like that.
Hmm.
When you feel like there's no doubt in the world, if I was the only person on earth who believed this and everyone else just stopped believing, I would still believe it. Like I'm dead
Hmm.
set on this. Then you can preach that with so much more passion than you would have otherwise. And that applies to sermon preparation and teaching lessons. If you believe this is it, this is exactly what it's saying, and this applies perfectly to this area, you can preach it very powerfully and passionately. Um, and I think that if I were to choose between eloquence in preaching and a sense of people knowing that I believe this, and it's not any type of showmanship at all, and I could be bumbling over my words and stuttering the whole time. But if they feel like he really believes this, and based on what he's saying, yeah, that's exactly what the text means, and if I'm putting myself under the Bible, I have to do that, you know. Um, and I found that for me personally, when I'm in a text and I feel like you've cleared out all the other interpretations. I mean, you've dug deep in here. There's nothing else this could mean. Um, it's a neat place to be,
Right.
because then you're asking yourself, now that I know for sure this is what the Bible's saying, um, then it's all the more important to apply that to your everyday life.
Sure. Now, I'll give you a second to think over it, and you can decline the question altogether. But just for example's sake, is there, and I'll give you time to think about it, but is there an example of that you've done? And because we've talked about some things, and you shed some light on some things for me, and just little passages, even just one word that you could give it as an example. And we know the Bible's of no private interpretation, but something that you really feel in your heart of hearts that you've minded out. Is there a example just for people listening? Say, why do I need to drop $600 on the base package of Logos and for all these books, and why do I need to take the time? I got my King James Bible and that's all I need. Can you give us an example of something that might say, hey, you've never thought about this, it's biblical, something you can think of like that, like
Right,
that?
right. And it's not like you need, this specific program or
Sure.
something, but if anyone, is watching this, and you're wondering, okay, I do my devotions and I have my Bible, and I just feel like there's more there. If this can in any way, spark your interest to dig a little deeper, there's so many tools that would be helpful to you. You take the passage you just mentioned, that the Bible is of no private interpretation. What does that mean to you? Like, if I were to ask you straight up, okay, what does private interpretation mean?
Sure.
Um, what would you say?
I have to think of the context, but I would probably say, um, meaning that it's not a man by man decision. It's not a, you have one thought, I have one thought. We can all it's not a all roads lead to heaven type thing. There is, God said it one way, he meant it one way. That would be
Hmm.
my that would be
Right.
my go ahead.
And that's what all the Catholics would agree with you there too,
Okay.
because they believe that um, it's definitely of no private interpretation. You need the church's authority on what you're interpreting, how you're interpreting it, because we, mere humans can't understand the mind of God fully, and you can't have your own private interpretation. You can't just be sitting there with your Bible and expect to understand it. And so that's been used. I mean, that's a
Okay.
really interesting
Sure.
example, right?
Sure.
And so you read that in a commentary somewhere that that's the Catholic position. You're like, well, what exactly does this mean? Because
Right. If I
it
agree with the
doesn't mean
Catholics, does that automatically mean I'm wrong?
right. Okay, but it doesn't mean that okay. I can sit underneath a palm tree with my Bible and not attend church, and I can just have my own private little thing there either. I don't think that's what it's talking about either. I think in context, it's talking about how we got the Bible. It's saying that um, I believe it's there in First Peter, if I'm not mistaken, and it's men of God were carried along by the Holy Spirit and this and that, and then right after that it says it's of no private interpretation. In other words, that the people that God gave the Word of God to, those prophets, it wasn't their own interpretation, their own little scribblings on how you should live life. No, it was from God Himself, and it was their interpretation that it's talking about, I think. And I
Hmm.
think for me that changes
Sure.
the whole way we quote that verse.
Sure.
And so that's an interesting little thing.
Right.
But there is the idea that really all you need, Micah, is a Bible, and hopefully you don't have a study Bible. Hopefully you don't have any cross reference. It's just the text, okay? And that's all you need. It just takes only a couple examples to say that just can't be so, right? That might be all you need if you know every single word definition there is, you know all the customs and cultures of the Bible to be able to understand it. Yeah, if that's you and you have all of that information, then yeah, sure, that's all you need is the Bible. Um, but there's just so many cultures that have to have a certain custom explained in order for something to make sense at all. So I mean, there's places that a missionary might go where the people there have never even seen a sheep or a lamb. Like, they literally don't know what it is, right?
Hmm.
And so the missionary has the option. Okay, when I'm translating the Bible in this language, do I translate sheep as pig? They know what that is. You imagine how much theology that would destroy in the Old Testament, especially. Or do you
Right.
just invent a new word for them in that language that a lamb is this? It requires you teaching what that concept is in
Hmm.
order to grasp um, whole passages of the Bible. So if you don't know what that concept is, then you sitting underneath a tree with your Bible, you can't understand certain passages.
Hmm.
And that's just with a word concept. There's whole cultural customs that are helpful to understanding a text too, right? That doesn't mean that if someone is not terribly educated or whatever, they're not going to understand the Bible, but really they're not going to understand it at the very granular level. Like if you go to a passage in Ezekiel and you say, okay, this verse right here where God says, "I am against your pillows," what does that mean? And you need some help there, right?
Sure.
It's not saying that God is against sleeping on pillows. Okay, I mean
Right.
it's
Right.
so
Absolutely.
so so you need some sort of help, whether it's with word studies or with background issues or whatever, and they call that hermeneutics. And
Sure.
that's not some sort of dirty word. One way or another, we have to figure out how to study the Word of God and to figure out what it's saying. And again, too, there's an idea that you don't need dictionaries either, and that the Bible just defines itself. And certainly you can say that with any sort of book. Like you pick up Moby Dick, or you pick up a work by Dickens, and you can kind of tell by context what a word means. That's not unique to the Bible, but it doesn't hold true in every case.
Right.
there are certain passages where you really can't figure out what the word, say, pillow means in that context. Now,
Right.
how many of those cases are there? There's not tons of them, but it's just not true that you can, in every single case, with every word in the Bible, just figure out what it means based on other times that it's mentioned. Sometimes
Sure.
it's not mentioned anywhere else. It's not helpful.
Right.
To get
The law of first mention doesn't help you if it's the first time it's mentioned and last, and you have no idea what it's saying.
right, yeah, and a lot of times the law of first mention is like the rule of thumb of first mention. It doesn't work either all the
Right.
time.
I before E,
You know?
except after. Right. Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. So one example here of like a custom that comes in handy. You have the parable of the king who's throwing the big celebration, and he invites all the
Hmm.
noble people and everything, and they won't come. They give all these excuses. So he says, "Go into the highways and hedges, compel them to come in." So they're rounding up all the bums on the street and everyone else, and they're all coming in. And then there's this guy who the text says he didn't have a wedding garment. So the king took him and threw him out into utter darkness, where there's wailing and gnashing of teeth. And you're like, I mean, here's a bum on the side of the road that you got into the celebration. Well, of course he's not going to have a kingly garment to come into the celebration with, and so you're kind of stuck going, was the king just a jerk? Or, I mean, but the king represents God, so that can't be it.
Right.
Okay, and so you pick up just like any resource at all, and it will explain that there was a cultural custom that a lot of times kings would take garments out of their own wardrobe and send them out as celebration invitations, as a wedding invitation or whatever. And so he graciously gives you of himself in order to come to the feast, and you try to get there on your own without his grace is the whole point, and that opens up the whole parable.
Right.
But I would not have known that if it hadn't been for some resource that would have guided me. And
Sure.
it's not like every resource is infallible. None of them are. But that's just the nature of life. Okay, the same folks that might not want to use a resource because those are man's words, have a Schofield Bible. I mean, it doesn't make sense. And
Right.
so that's a personal conviction of mine that you get more if you dig more into the Bible. There's all sorts of dangers there too. It's not like you can just pick up any resource and figure it out, but it's like working construction. I personally have never dealt with heavy equipment before, and if I just tried to jump in and use certain saws or whatever, I'd get my fingers cut off because I've never been trained on how to do that. And so a little bit of training, some um, a couple hours of going through with someone who's done this before, some older men who could guide you in that sort of thing is very helpful, and you learn how to use the saw without cutting your fingers off. There are certain resources, and I know you want to probably move on to another topic, but
You're
just
fine.
one here. There are certain resources that are written by unsaved people that are still very helpful. I just bought a massive commentary on Leviticus by an Orthodox rabbi, and the man's not saved. There's no way he is, and he in a lot of places it's you know him explaining from a Jewish perspective what certain things mean, but it's a gold mine of background information that I wouldn't have gotten anywhere else.
Right.
And it's very helpful, and he explains a lot of the laws that are that the Canaanites, the Moabites, Hittites, all of these neighbors of Israel had that parallel the Levitical laws, and then he mentions how Israel's laws were distinct and what set them apart.
Hmm.
Without having that information, um, you miss a lot. And what I've gained so far has been very, very helpful. Because I
Sure.
thought, I used to think that Israel was very unique and they were the only one with this massive set of laws.
Sure.
And the fact is that all of their neighbors had large sets of laws. They had temples, they had animal sacrifices, but the distinguishing factors are what makes all the difference.
Mm.
It's very interesting. So one example there, all of the neighboring countries or races and the people that God said to wipe out and get out of the Canaan land, right? All of them in their sacrificial system, everything revolved around some sort of demon. So if you were offering a sacrifice, it wasn't because of some sin you did. It was for some demon you're trying to appease, to ward off his wrath, to get something from them. And it was this kind of meritorious works system.
Sure.
Where I want to get the demon to leave me alone, or do this for me, or do that for me, and their whole system was based on that sort of thing. And in Israel's system, there was not many gods, but one, always one. And the demon wasn't the one who was ticking off the god; it was humans themselves. I mean, it's very interesting, but
Right.
but a commentary like that, even written by an unsaved person, if you handle it with care, there are certain nuggets in there that are very helpful. And how much would that affect a sermon? Maybe you talk for 30 seconds about that, and it's a lot of reading for a little bit of payoff, but you would not have gotten that elsewhere. And that's my conviction that I've come to.
Sure, and I'm not going to get into it because I'm speaking ignorantly, but I can already think of one or two practical applications that you could revolve a whole sermon around with the last example. And I think that's one of the reasons that I started this podcast is because there's a lot of people I'd like to talk to for an hour, and you may have heard this before. Those of you that have listened have heard this before. A lot of people I'd like to talk to for an hour, but I don't have a good excuse to. Now, you and I have probably talked far more than anyone else I've had on the podcast so far since our time, separating in college.
Yeah, you got to maintain friendships intentionally.
Sure, absolutely. And this is a vehicle to kind of allow that, because you said you want to move on to another subject. No, I'm greatly enjoying, because it just whets my appetite again for, man, I got to get back, dive deeper. I got to work harder at it. Because just like with working out, just like with eating right, the more you do, the better it gets. But I think for people that are on the outside looking in, have no clue, have never even dipped their toe in the water, it's okay to not know what you don't know. But you got to come to that realization. You got to realize, I don't know a whole lot, but I want to change that. And that was a realization for me, in that I didn't know a whole lot, or I still don't know a whole lot, but I want to change it, and it's an active thing. Now, I'm farther back on the journey than you are, but we're headed the same direction. But I appreciate that. You laid out very well. If anyone's interested, go to, you don't have to use this resource, but Logos, LOGOS, .com. I have it. I need to use it more. It's a great resource. Check it out. And that they have, starter packs or basic things to just dip your feet in it and see if you'd like it. But a transition for just saying it here, because there's a story I want to get to about someone that we know, soul winning. Your dad's obviously, too many, and for good reason, considered a guru of soul winning, because he does it very, very well personally. I know he just taught, I think up at North Valley, if I'm not mistaken, about it. But for you, I know you're good soul winner because we've gone soul winning together.
Okay, so let me stop you there real quick. This is real interesting. So my dad does this this clinic there at North Valley for a day. He just did that, and a convert of ours, Geraldo Reyes, you remember, he came up to my dad and said, "Hey, Jonathan led me to the Lord there in Bible college, and you made that visit with me," and that's just really neat to hear.
Yeah, well, the thing, and not to be unspiritual, but I love food. I remember the menuto that we ate there. I think on our follow-up visit, that was excellent. So I will always remember Geraldo. I would love to. Unfortunately, can't go to Pastor's Conference. This is a good moment to tell you we started the podcast number 16 with Brother Jonathan Ray a bit early, because the North Valley National Pastors and Workers Conference starts at, I think, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific. And so as soon as this ends, we're going to definitely end before that. But jump on and watch that, nvbc.org. Would love for you to hear some of the preaching and singing going on. But would love to, next time I'm out there, get a hold of Geraldo. We're talking 6-7 years ago that you led him to the Lord. Would that have been something like that?
So I graduated in 2012, so
Okay.
it's 7 or 8 years ago.
7 or 8 years, yeah. Because I
Yeah.
graduated 13, so yeah, 7-8 years ago. And praise the Lord, not by our doing, but the fact that he's still faithfully there and was at a soul winning clinic. That's just fantastic. I mean, who knows how many people he's led to the Lord in his spiritual life? So that's awesome.
Yeah, I
Where
know I interrupted you there, but I thought
No,
that
no,
was
no,
neat
no. It's a
to
great
mention.
story, and it's a product of these Bible college students running around like chickens with a head cut off, doing ministry, and some of it sticks sometimes. And that's a blessing. Did you? You don't learn. Soul winning doesn't come through osmosis and all that. But at what point in your life as a teenager, did you see your dad doing it? Did you go out with your dad, and so you became good at the script, if you want to call it that? Or at what point for you did you say, "Man, this is something I need to make part of who I am as well"?
Yeah, our church is just a soul winning church.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in the past couple of years, my health has not allowed me to go as often I'd like. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's been a weekly thing because I'd love it to be, but it hasn't been. But when I have been very consistently healthy, it's just a thing where you get out there and it could be that you're not looking forward to it all because it's just
Mm-hmm.
the moment you get out there and you knock two or three doors, you just get excited. You're meeting brand new people,
Mm-hmm.
and and getting to witness to them. Our church has made it a culture of soul winning. It is not one thing that's tacked on.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Great Commission is central, and
Sure.
that's one part of the Great Commission. But when that becomes central, the spirit of this church is not centering on all the things on the periphery. There's all sorts of little debates and things that cause schisms and people getting angry at one another. But if everyone is on the same page, knowing that the big thing, if we do the big thing, we're doing great and we're going in the right direction. Schisms happen when you think the big thing is not what the big thing is, and it's some weird little doctrine you're getting bent out of shape about, or
Mm-hmm.
um, bickering with one another, whatever. But the emphasis, if it's on the Great Commission, just makes very happy people because you're really doing what God has placed you on this earth to do. And so that's a credit to my dad of being consistent about it. It's been a push and an emphasis from the very beginning, and it hasn't let up.
Sure. And
So,
I'm glad you took it in that direction. Though I was talking about you personally, and you answered that question, but pointing out that keeping the main thing the main thing. We ridicule churches that split over the color of the carpet, but unless it is soul winning or the gospel, and understand, I'm not saying we all just need to sing Kumbaya and join hands, but there, like you said, there's a lot of other little things that are just as ridiculous. If we were all focused on the main thing, we would be a whole lot better off. And I love the fact that you mentioned that making it a culture, that it's just something that, and it's top down, and your father obviously does a great job with that, and consistently in his own personal life. And I'm thinking this is a personal thing that Mike Ray does, but it's a church thing that Mike Ray's a part of, which is great, and it also allows for that exponential growth, the multiplication growth, instead of it just being Mike Ray standing on the dock fishing. It's everyone else in the church standing on the dock too, and that's fantastic. And you are married to Miss Melanie. I kind of skimmed over the family and all of that. Miss Melanie, and the little one. And Miss Melanie plays the piano, I believe, was able to be on
Mm-hmm.
some tour groups and things, has a great family, and appreciate knowing some of her family as well. And you guys get to serve in the ministry together there. Now, remind me, if you don't mind, who else is on staff there at, because I know some great folks have been on staff. Who's on staff there in
Yeah.
Napa?
Yeah. So Melanie does all the music. She has almost 20 piano students. She does the prep work for the choir, does all the special music, all that sort of thing. So that's that's
A
it's a
big
big
staff.
deal. Yeah.
Yes.
Especially with a little toddler running around. There's me. I do a lot of odds and ends stuff, graphic design, adult discipleship, adult Sunday school, that type of thing. And then Eric Marzak is our youth pastor. He's also our choir director, our Christian school principal, and every other thing that we need. His wife Charity, my sister, just had twin girls a
Awesome.
couple days ago, and then we have our bookkeeper, Miss Rachel, my dad. We have our Christian school staff, and that's pretty much it. Which means that we are a layman run church, and
Mhm.
so we have power laymen, if you will,
Mhm.
who are true pillars of the church and are not paid. People like Berto Garcia, who does our RU ministry and does a bus route as well. But it's a very large RU ministry, and he just has a passion for that. We have just so many people that I could name that have shouldered the load, and it didn't require a full-time staff member to do, say, lawn maintenance or something. I mean, it's
Sure. Yeah,
when
and people don't understand the cost of living sometimes in California. And the things that some I was going to mention, not to dive too far back, but speaking of soul winning, it works in Napa and California. And people have these preconceptions about what California is and the type of people and things. But I can tell you, if it works, if soul winning, door to door confrontational soul winning. Now, I'm sure you guys have a whole lot of hooks in the water. I mean, we talked about Facebook marketing and some different advertising you can do, just another hook in the water. But if door to door confrontational soul winning works where you're at, it definitely works on the East Coast. It definitely works in the Midwest. And I think people get away from thinking. Now, I'm not saying that should be your only hook in the water, but if you only have to pick one, it's a pretty good one to pick in this.
well,
Go ahead.
yeah, no. Here's the thing, though. You have to make some distinctions. I think
Mhm.
soul winning is not going out and knocking on doors and inviting people.
Sure.
You
Sure.
won't get a whole lot of people in church that way. If it's
Mhm.
hello, here's an invitation. Would love to have you come sometime.
Right.
If a church has moved from soul winning to that, well, no wonder it doesn't work. We're talking about presenting the gospel to people and seeing people accept Christ at the door there, or have more questions, come to the church. Those people who have a real connection with you are more likely to stick than people that you just give a tract to. We're
That,
talking about
go
giving
ahead.
the gospel to people is the hook here, and
Sure.
not just
That's an
yeah.
important distinction. What would you say, just off the top of your head, for people to answer the door? What's the percentage of people that just use your dad as an example of an excellent soul winner? What's the percentage of people that your dad gets into at least the question? Do you know for sure where however he asks it? Do you know for sure where you'd go? What's the percentage of people that he talks to that open the door?
Well, you always have very friendly people,
Right. Right.
but say you knock 100 doors, you may have someone let you present the gospel the whole way through.
Hmm.
So if you're going soul winning 1 hour a week, you may not get that chance for 5 weeks.
Right.
And that's just how it goes.
Right.
But soul winning works in the case where if you put enough hours in, you meet enough people, someone will allow you to present the gospel to them. Someone is ready. If on a given Sunday morning we asked everyone to stand who my dad personally got in church, you might have a fourth of the auditorium stand. So it works if you put that time in it, and it is a priority. If it's just something you dabble in, that's why people quit the soul winning ministries, because it's not effective.
Right. And you got to work it to make it work. We have some friends that not to change the subject, but we have some friends with Fabrizio and some other folks that we know from the past. and it's praise God to see some of them, though some not. This is not slight. Some not in the ministry because God didn't call them to, and that was not their life calling. But it's great to see some of them products of Hopewell that are still serving God. Your dad, obviously, fantastic youth pastor, written books on that as well. Can you speak to the culture of now? Brother Marzak has that responsibility there, correct?
Was that?
Or you said Brother Marzak has the youth. That's his responsibility there.
Yep.
Correct. But obviously, you learned much from your father. As far as a culture of youth work, and we won't get too far in the weeds on this, but the culture of youth work that you got to see your dad put in. I would like to talk to him at some point about this in person. But what are some emphases that he put on into youth work that put out some of the names that you and I both know that are serving God, whether in ministry or out?
Yeah, I don't really know how to answer that. I mean, it was a great youth group, and Brother Eric has done a great job in his his example to all of us, and just being faithful. And he's been a youth pastor for 12, 14 years, and that's pretty rare. Right. And he's content to be that man here, and so. Sure. And he's not allowed to leave either because he has the grandkids. So.
Right. And he just does, from everything I've heard, does a great job there. Now, let me check the time. We're getting close to an hour or so. And I feel like we could talk, you and I have talked for over hours sometimes on finer points of different theology. And normally you are the one doing all the intelligent talking. And I'm the straight man that just says,
no, that's not true. That's not true.
But, we won't belabor it too long. Any thoughts or any things that I'm missing, didn't pick up on? I always try to get into what my interviewees are passionate about. Anything that I might have missed along those veins?
It really does depend on what you want to dig into. I can talk your ear off, I'm sure, but
sure.
I don't know. It's up to you.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I greatly appreciate you taking the time. For those that are listening, Jonathan Ray has been a good friend to me for many years now, and in my lifetime at least. It's not that long in the grand scheme, but in my lifetime, relative to me, and one of the few that has not found me worthy, but been there, because there's a lot of folks I know that we both went to college with that were, call it, shining stars, and it's not a knock on them. They were, quote, shining stars while they were there, and have since never to be heard from. And that's not just because they don't have a big social media presence. And so I appreciate your consistency. And you mentioned, it being maybe halfway through Bible college that you got that solidified. But I appreciate the fact that you've been there, you've stayed, even with some health issues we won't get into and things, but different things going on. You've stayed, and so I greatly appreciate that, and hope I've been as good a friend to you as you have to me. And,
yeah, absolutely.
We will not belabor the point or anything, but I think at some point maybe we'll just have just a straight theology talk, okay, and we can just get way into the weeds on just some fine point of something, and just blow people's minds with something crazy. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, the big thing there. It's. I wanted to loop back to something you said. Mm-hmm. Of course, Bible college is not going to teach you everything, and it really is not a knock on Bible college, because it's not the point of it, right, to do that. And I'm glad that Bible college allowed us to know how to do ministry and to use it as a laboratory a little bit on. Here's how you do a ministry. You figure it out here, and maybe you make some mistakes, right, and then you go out to your own ministry. But I feel like Bible college, teaches you the ministry aspect, and then if you do other classes down the road, or you just read a lot of books or whatever just on your own, you can always add the depth on top.
Right.
But especially if you're doing some sort of online classes, and I know you did a couple, right? Mm-hmm. If you're doing online classes, you're not there in person, and you can't teach someone how to preach, right, or how to do certain ministries online, right, listening to a couple videos or something. Sure. the substitute for going to a college, if you can, there really is no substitute for in-person learning on the practical aspects. You can always add the study tool type of stuff afterwards. And
Hmm.
so colleges that are offering programs to do the undergrad all online, I just personally think is a really bad idea if you can go there. If
Hmm.
you're an older person in the church and you don't want to uproot stakes and you just want, a Bible college education, that's great for online people. But for people straight out of Bible college, online college should not be something you pursue at all.
Sure.
If you want to have real practical training, and
Hmm.
I really believe that. And so I think seminary adds the theoretical, and Bible college does the practical, but it has to be done in that order: the practical, and then on top of there, you can't. There's only so many things you can cram in a 4-year degree.
Hmm.
So
Hmm. No, that's a great point. And for those that are listening, and as a youth pastor, I would just say ditto. I would say absolutely right. And that's not even speaking of the growing up that a lot of people need to do, especially in this day and age. We're not coming off, and I'm speaking for myself too. I didn't come from a family, and this is not knocking my parents, but from a family where, I knew how to milk cows and, do all these, crazy things at 3 o'clock in the morning. And my dad ran a tight ship, and I still know drill and ceremony from the military, and I can still salute properly. But those are things that other people might not have. But there's a lot of growth in that 18 to 22, 17 to 21 timeframe that a lot of people need. And they need to they need to stand in Brother Oxendine's office and be told, no, this is just how it's going to be. And, but it's not fair. Well, this is how it's going to be. And you need that, especially when you're always told, you're right and everything about you is awesome when everything isn't. But I think you're exactly right that because you and I have talked about, there doesn't seem to be many good independent Baptist seminaries. Well, that's on purpose. Not on purpose, but there's a reason for that, because they're all set up to produce preachers, to produce people that want to go out and do ministry. And you can learn the finer points. You can get into Zechariah and Ezekiel, but to get down the Romans road, you don't need those. And so in 4 years of Bible college, you can learn a lot of practical stuff. And so I think that's a great point. And for those that are listening, if there are any teenagers listening, strongly consider Bible college. And like Jonathan Ray said, strongly consider not doing just online. I say I can stay in my home church. Yes, you can, and you can learn a lot of practical things in your home church. But there is something to be said for going even 3,000 miles away to California from Ohio or wherever you may be, and learning those things, boots on the ground with people you don't know, and making friends of a lifetime, people that you will converse with years and years down the road. If I had stayed at home, we never would have met, and our life would have taken different turns. So I appreciate that. So any last words before we go off the air here?
I just think on that, just to add a little bit to that online
Please.
type thing discussion. Um, when you do online classes or distance learning classes, they call it, it's meant for you as a very highly motivated person who wants to do research. That does not describe an undergrad degree, right? It's very different. So you're isolated. You're by yourself. You have no social interaction in ministry. And a lot of times, online colleges that are doing bachelor's degree are money-making tools. It's not some sort of bash. It's just that's reality. It does allow them to make a lot more money than they would have. And again, it's helpful for older people. I mean, people with families at least, to be able to stay in their home church and get educated. But I can't stress enough that it's just not a good idea if you're not solely going in to learn how to study the Bible or doing biblical research to think it's some sort of good substitute.
Sure.
So I don't know.
Sure.
That's
No,
parting shot at that. Yeah.
No, I think you're exactly right. I hope someone takes that to heart. You only, especially for younger folks, you only got one shot at your 17, 18. You only got one shot at any time. But the saying, you only live once, that is very true. And if you not cripple yourself, but I think you hinder yourself a little bit when you don't expose yourself to all that you could. And yes, will it cost a little bit more? Does it require some travel? Yes, but it will be better for you. People can bemoan the ills of Bible college and things, but until you come up with a better substitute that actually works in the practical, real world, it's a good system, and God's blessed it, and we're products of it. So maybe I won't speak too highly of how good it is. But hey, Jonathan, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you. This has been, stick around for a second, Jonathan, but this has been Micah McCurry Live, number 16, with Brother Jonathan Ray. Greatly appreciate it, sir. We will go off the air